Sometimes I think about life and death, but not because I'm worried about drawing my last breath. I'm just wondering about logistics and getting here to there. Will I rent the basement apartment or own the penthouse in the air? What do you think about before you say goodnight? What do you dream about while you're sleeping tight? What are your assessments of your life so far? Do you feel fulfilled or are you wishing on the stars?
Hello, welcome to Songs and Stories, Volume 9. This one is entitled, This Person Changed Me. I want to thank Frank Crutelli, who provided his song So Did I as our new theme song. That comes from the Riverbend Demos EP, and it's available at Frank Crutelli's Bandcamp page. I also want to give ongoing thanks to Robin, Doug, and Maria from Next Door Restaurant, who gave me this series in the first place. Thank you to Rev Kev Ewing at Baobab Tree Studios for running tech for these virtual shows that we're doing now. If you are interested in doing your own storytelling, you can join the Institute Library Storytelling Group that meets on the second and fourth Thursday of every month on Zoom currently. It's a New Haven group, but now that it's on Zoom, it's national. So you can join that group from anywhere and develop your personal storytelling or your folk tales. Please donate $5 tonight, and all the money raised goes to the artists or their chosen charities. My first performer tonight is Deacon Art Miller, and I first saw Deacon Art Miller at Trinity College, and his storytelling, I was telling him tonight, his storytelling was so dynamic and so interactive with the audience, and he used his body so much that I wish you could see him in front of a crowd. But he also has a lot of experience in front of a camera, so he's going to be great tonight. This, here it is his book, The Journey to Chatham, Why Emmett Till's Murder Changed America, A Personal Story. And Deacon Art Miller grew up in Chicago and was a personal friend, and his brother was in the class of Emmett Till. So take the floor, Deacon Art Miller.
Oh, thank you so much, Saul. It is, a joy to be here with all of the viewers this evening. And the story I want to tell is a true story. And it takes place many, many years ago. In 1957, I was just a 12-year-old little boy. And I went to school for the first time in my new school. My family had just moved to this new community. And when I walked in the school, I was nervous. I was a little boy. He wasn't as big as I am now. And when I walked in, I looked around. I was a pretty good little student, so I wasn't particularly worried about my studies. Went to school and saw it, and when I got home, my family greeted me. How was school today? Oh, it was good. It was good. Next day, I went to school, and when I went to school, this again was 1957, and we had those desks that had a wooden platform on it, and you had to lift the desktop up. And on the top of the desk, it was made of wood, were all of the carvings from kids from years gone by. And when I opened the desk, there was this note, and it was to Arthur. So I opened up the note. It said, "Dear Arthur, I like you. Who do you like? Please check the box." And she had a lot of little girls' names on it, and it was from Victoria Hawkins. Well, I'd only been in school one day. How do I know? How did she like me? I didn't know who it was, so I just threw the note away. What does a little boy do? So I went back to school and did my work, and the next day came to school and opened the desk, And there was that note again. And you know what it said? Dear Arthur, I like you. Who do you like? Please check the box. And there are these little girls' names on it. And again, I don't know who these people are. I don't even know who the girl was who signed it. And it was Victoria Hawkins. So I threw it away. Went home and parents out of school. It was lovely. Went back to school the next day, opened the desk, and you know it was there, of course. It was the note. And you know what it said, of course. Dear Arthur, I like you. Who do you like? Yeah, please check the box, right? And then I threw it away. And and went about school. And then the next day I came to school. And of course, I looked at my desk. Oh, my goodness, who's going to be there? There it was. And you know, there was a note. And you know what it said? Yes, that's right. Dear Arthur, I like you. Who do you like? Yes, please check the box. And you know what I did with it, of course. I threw it away. But at this time, I kind of looked around the room, and there was this little girl who was staring at me. I said, oh, my goodness. What do I do? I'm afraid of girls. Oh, my. So I just threw the note away and tried to ignore her. And I had made a couple little friends. And, you know, something I noticed was happening, though. This little girl, Victoria, the one who was sending me the notes, everybody was picking on her. And I didn't know why, but they were bullying that little girl. So every day I'd see the note, Dear Art, I like you. Who do you like? Please check the box with little girls, and I'd throw it away. And then I noticed they were throwing stones at her, stuff like that at recess. All the girls would be on one side of the playground, the boys would be on the other side of the playground, and they'd run and make fun of her. At lunchtime, well, she always sat in the corner by herself. And every once in a while, a kid would walk by and knock her milk over, and she would slowly clean it up. I never, ever bullied the little girl, Victoria Hawkins. Well, over time, she continued to send me that note. Dear Art, I like you. Who do you like? Please check the box. And I would always throw it away. But then 7th grade ended, and 8th grade, I didn't get the notes as frequently, but I still did get the notes. And finally, after 8th grade, we all went to high school, the same high school, Hirsch High School on the south side of Chicago. And what happened there was interesting. I am a nerd, and of course, we had all of our classes by ourselves, and there was about 27, 28 of us. And in the classes for honors, Victoria was there as well, because she was a bright little girl. And by the time we got to high school, she wasn't sending notes any longer. But they never stopped bullying that little girl. I remember seeing her crying as she'd come into class. And I always noticed she left class really early to try to get to the next class before the hallways were filled with little boys and little girls, and they were a lot bigger and a lot meaner. I remember once that someone put a lit match into her locker. It was very cruel. I never, ever bullied Victoria Hawkins. Well, our freshman year ended, our sophomore year. Our junior year came, and our senior year, and she didn't go to the prom. In fact, I don't even remember her at our graduation, because I had received a little scholarship, and where names were called, her name was, and she wasn't even there. But we know she graduated simply because she got a small scholarship. Now, that summer that I graduated from high school was 1963. 1963 was the first time I was arrested as a civil rights worker. I had heeded the call of Dr. King and wanted to make a statement against the bullying and the injustice that confronted Black America. So I sat in the street and protested against what I felt was not justifiable. In fact, was profound injustice. It was interesting, though, as I sat in that jail, it dawned on me I was willing to stand up for Black folks in America, but I never stood up for Victoria Hawkins, not once. And my silence perpetuated her pain. I swore at that point I would never be silent again. I would never, ever allow an injustice to occur in front of me and not speak against it. You know, folks have asked me over the years, whatever happened to Victoria Hawkins? Truth is, I don't know. I looked for her, and maybe it was only cursory kind of searching. But you see, what I have come to recognize is this. It is more important at this point for people to hear this story and for them to recognize there are moments in their lives too where they were silent. There may have even been moments in their lives where they were the bully. Maybe they were the victim. And I just hope that they know that in some way the price and the suffering that Victoria Hawkins paid transformed me and a lot of other people so that we began to stand up because we didn't stand up when it was important for us to do so. And that's my story. And I want you to know that because of that, I kind of have a saying. I'm a clergy. And one of the things I live by is what I refer to as the 10th commandment. And that 10th commandment is, thou shalt not be a bystander. Thank you. Saul?
I love your generosity here in telling us about Victoria Hawkins because, you know, I see you as a person consciously making change in the world and doing really powerful work. And the fact that you will allow us to know that you also had that moment where you could have acted and didn't. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you use that now in your work, I think all of us have that child somewhere in our memory.
You know, so when I tell that story in schools and universities, at towns and police departments, even in prisons, I tell that story. I'm talking to myself, that 12-year-old little boy, telling him that find the courage, find the courage, find the courage. Yeah.
All right, that's beautiful. Okay, we are going to move on to some music. Liz Galorn is a singer-songwriter, a band leader, a guitarist, banjo player, lap steel player, mandolin player from Shelton, Connecticut, whose music straddles the worlds of rock and folk. She was in the second ever Songs and Stories that I did back in September. Her most recent single is Dolores and I, which appears on the compilation Waiting for a Sunrise, Volume 1. Info on finding that and her other recordings can be found at littlecowgirl.com. I'll put that in the comments. And she is currently writing songs for her next record. Liz.
Thanks a lot, Saul. That was very powerful, Deacon Art, and this might be a little bit of artistic whiplash. I'm going to play some rock folk about some consequential relationships in my life, separated by 20 years and the line between fiction and truth, at least the first two songs. The first one is called Impossible, and it was on my first record, and I started messing around with it again with my 47-year-old voice instead of my 23-year-old voice. So let's see how that goes. sometimes I want what you can give. Whether broken or disowned, you open up the doors and leave all the lights on. Excuse me when it all settles in, and there's nothing on TV. Will we ever watch reruns of Chico and the Man? The funny thing that strikes me is it's really impossible, really impossible, really impossible, really impossible, really impossible. Only sometimes we turn our clocks awry, like naughty little boys who spend their time thinking about the things they want to do. The funny thing that strikes me is it's really impossible, really impossible, really impossible, really impossible, really impossible. Everyone's got something on us. I read it every day. Come closer and we'll sit here in my room like vampires waiting for the dawn. All right, so that was many years ago, and this song is called Sassafras, and it's about a molecule rearranging attraction, which is kind of forbidden. And this song is from the past of Liscalorn, not the present, but I wrote it very recently. So, Sassafras. Will you recognize me when we get very old? Or when you are Hamlet and I am Yorick's skull? Would you see my dented cranium and get sad-eyed and misty? I think about you all the time. Won't you please remember me? Kiss me, sassafras, I feel you shiver in my skin. But I can't replace the parts of me that broke where you got in. Since you became a window and I became a door, I've melted down my armament so I could win the war. I'd crawl in dirt to satisfy the smallest of your whims, but I can't replace the parts of me that broke when you got in. Diamonds are worthless, although they don't come cheap. Life is but a moment, the plastic is for keeps. When gravity reverses and we're blown out into space, at least you'll She'll know I told the truth I didn't want to face. The memories entombed in the museum in my mind, organized in cases with the words you'd left behind. You've rearranged my molecules and pulverized my bones in this dusty old pavilion. You are my cornerstone. Kiss me sassafras and feel me shiver in my skin. I can't replace the parts of me that broke where you got in. Will you recognize me when we got very old? Or if you are Hamlet and I am your skull? Goodbye sassafras, for sure I'm trading gold for tin. But I cannot work the parts of me that quit when you got in. That quit when you got in. That quit when you came in. When I am your skull. When I am your skull. Alrighty. So this song takes us all the way up to the pandemic beginning, and it's about a relationship I have with a person who is not human named Dolores. Dolores and I are listening to the wind. The passage of time gets under my skin, and I try to behave normally. Whatever does that mean? While the squirrel watches me outside the window, the shadow of our house creeps down the yard. The daffodils bloom, the trees are leafing out. The last time that I drove to work, the weeping cherry trees were beginning to turn green along the highway. The golden hour sunlight in the valley below, would I have ever seen it the way I see it now if this had never happened? What from this life will I remember when I am outside around friends again? Will I recall all the details I had noticed here today? Or will I push away what I've been thinking? How transgressive will it feel to hug everyone I meet? Will the bells ring out in the street, just like on Easter morning? Just like on Easter morning. Dolores and I, Dolores and I, Dolores and I.
A perfect song for right now. And listening to that, I got into this sort of sad reverie, thinking about how your songs, you're not a ballad songwriter. You're a songwriter of these images. Like it's poetic and it's sort of cinematic. And I realize in a lot of your songs, a person is walking through natural space, outdoor space, trees, forests, even along the highway. And listening to that song, I got this sort of wistful, like, Liz is not, able to, none of us are able to, be out in the world in the way that we were before this pandemic. And I hope that for people who enjoy tonight, that it's an opportunity to feel a little bit of the human connection that you do feel in the normal world when you're, even when you're not talking to people, but you're just around them more often and you're just in outdoor spaces with them.
Yeah. So Dolores the cat got me through the first few months of staring out the window in existential dread. And
Dolores and I.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
okay.
Everybody.
So Ponybird is not able to be with us tonight. She is feeling under the weather. So we are going to move on with some storytelling. And Kathy Schufro is a storyteller from my personal storytelling group that I do with Arnie Pritchard leads it, but that is at the Institute Library. And one of the things about Kathy is that she's been a member for a long time, and she doesn't often tell her stories in front of an audience, but she does tell her stories to us within the group. And the thing about her stories is that they tend to be about human connection, even in places where you don't speak the same language. There are stories from Russia, from Southeast Asia, and she always manages to make some sort of human connection across these barriers. The story tonight it deals with someone who does speak the same language, but that is a common theme that I see from Kathy's stories and that I really appreciate in her storytelling. She writes for magazines on topics ranging from Zika to costume design to grizzly bears, and some of her work can be seen at kathyschufro.com. I'll put that in the chat. She reports that in her spare time, she is learning Spanish by chatting with a lot of displaced Venezuelans who are teaching online, and that does not surprise me at all. It is in keeping with my image of Kathy Schufro as always reaching across cultural barriers to make human connections. So here is Kathy with her story.
Thank you, Saul. This is a true story. He was the last person I wrote to before I quit the dating site in the winter of 2009. His name was Henry Carter. What had caught my eye was his shaggy gray hair that hadn't had any contact with a barber's shears in many months. But he was a law school professor, and I liked that combination of nonconformity and accomplishment. He wrote back and said he didn't have much faith in online dating, but if I came to New York, we could have lunch. So I took the train from New Haven, and I came up from the subway in Greenwich Village and saw him standing there in front of the restaurant. And as I approached him, I knew at that moment that I wasn't attracted to him. He led the way into the restaurant and suggested that we eat in the courtyard. It was a really warm day for March. And he invited me to sit so that I could look out at the scene. And that was not only considerate, but it was astute because I am someone who likes to check out the scene. He was easy to talk to, although he had very intense eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses. After lunch, we went and walked along the Hudson River, and I told him about my journalism, and he spoke about how he did journalism law. He was very interested in the survival of newspapers. At that time, they were beginning to close down all over the country because advertising was going online. He also told me that he had done pro bono work the year before for a lawsuit that ended up making gay marriage possible in California. His sister had been a plaintiff, and after their California Supreme Court victory, he paid for a lavish wedding for her and her partner. And he said it was over the top. It was too fancy for his taste. So I wondered why he paid for it. And he said, well, our parents are gone, and it's something I wanted to do for her. The next time we met was in Connecticut. We went hiking at Sleeping Giant Park, and on the way to the train station, we stopped in a Japanese restaurant for dinner. While we were waiting for our food, he pulled up his t-shirt, grabbed a bit of skin, and stuck a syringe in his belly to give himself insulin. That made me squeamish and uncomfortable, but I did admire that he was straightforward about his diabetes, which he'd contended with since childhood. After a couple more dates, I called him up and I said, Henry, it's been a lot of fun getting together with you, but I don't see us as a romantic couple. And he said, oh, good, I feel the same way. But I like your company, so what if you came down to New York anyway, every once in a while, and we could do things together? And if you would stay overnight, it would be less rushed. And I promise you that the guest couch is really comfortable. And so I said yes, but I was surprised that it really happened. Every few weeks, I'd go to New York. One week, we went to see a modern dance performance called The Garden of Earthly Delights by Martha Clark. Another time, we saw a movie, a French film, about a teacher based on a real teacher who had been teaching a whole bunch of teenagers who were all from North Africa, recent immigrants. Once when I got to Grand Central, he sent me a text and asked him to meet at a hospital. His friend Drew had learned that day that his cancer had returned and he only had a year to live. I felt pride that Henry had included me in that circle of grief and care. In the mornings, on Sundays, we'd usually go out to eat, but sometimes I persuaded him to let me cook. He was almost anti-domestic. He only had his nice apartment because his friends had told him he'd never find a girlfriend if he didn't move out of his shoebox, stuffed with books. When I did cook, he served everything on these wooden bowls, in these sort of like salad bowls that he really loved. The man had plates, but I don't think they ever came out of the cabinet. Then occasionally we would work together at opposite ends of the dining room table. I was teaching a writing class and correcting papers, and he was taking notes from these big books with tiny print. One day he told me that he thought that by 70, in 8 years, he would no longer be sharp enough to continue his work, that his intellect would deteriorate with age. And I protested, and I said, look, you've got IQ points to spare, and you don't know that you're going to decline. But looking back, I think he was braver than me in looking at the possibilities of aging. I like to be in denial. It was July when I went to see him, right before his trip to China. He was super excited. He'd been invited to give a couple of lectures in different cities, and then he was going to travel. Before I left, he mentioned that he needed to get a bottle of wine across the street in case he went to this party on the roof of his building that night. I said I could make an excellent blueberry pie, and he could impress the guests a little more than he would with his boring wine. But he didn't want me to make the pie. I'm probably not going to go anyway, he told me. When he got back from China, he called me. He said he'd had a great time and he'd fallen in love. How had that happened? Well, he'd gone to the party on the rooftop, mentioned that he was going to China, and someone had introduced him to a woman who lived in the building. He'd seen her, even ridden the elevator with her, but he'd never greeted her. He was rather shy. She was going to China too to take a language course, and they met there and they fell in love. He showed me a picture of himself in front of some craggy mountains in China, and then the identical picture of Jessica in front of those mountains. She had straight, light brown hair. She was petite. She looked kind. I didn't expect to see him much after that because he was in that period of romance that's very absorbing. But in November, he wrote to say he was giving a talk at Yale, his scheme for how to save newspapers. And then he'd like to go to dinner with me if I was willing. So I went to the talk and we went to dinner, and I asked him a lot of questions about Jessica, and I got him to admit that they were spending most of their time together. But he said he felt sheepish about it because she was 20 years younger and she wasn't as intellectual as his past girlfriends. And I said, but Henry, you seem really happy. Why don't you just wait and see what happens? As I was driving home, I asked myself if I'd made a mistake. Why hadn't I snagged this kind and interesting man? But there was something that didn't fit between us, and I was happy that he had found someone that he loved. There was Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and then about the third week in January, I saw an op-ed that I thought would interest him. And I sent him the link and a short note. I don't remember what I said, but he replied immediately, and that was out of character. So I opened the message, and it said, "We're sad to say that Henry Carter died on December 8th, 2009. For further information, you may contact his sister. Your message has been discarded." My first reaction was, they discarded my message? That was not theirs to discard. That was between me and Henry. Who are they? How could they do that? And then the bigger picture sank in, and I thought, all these weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks since he died, I sort of semi-consciously imagined him out there in the world, and he was dead. It was a strange thought. And it struck me that I'd met him on email, and I've learned of his death on email, not from a human voice, not from someone I could commiserate with. I called his sister, and I was very lucky because the memorial service hadn't happened yet. It was happening in 6 days in New York. She told me he died in the gym in his building of a heart attack, perhaps a result of his diabetes. I went to the memorial. There were at least 100 people there. I saw his friend who'd had the cancer diagnosis. He was alive. He was the one we had been worrying about, not Henry. After the service, or I should say the ceremony, I went to talk to Jessica, and she told me that she was doing okay, that she missed him terribly. I asked her if she had a remembrance of him that she could keep, and she said that the sister had offered her a big carpet, a yellow carpet, but it was so big that she couldn't fit it in her apartment, so she declined. As I left New York to go home, I realized that a lot of what had been discussed during the memorial service was about how Henry had used his legal scholarship to try to preserve journalism because it was so important to democracy. A few weeks later, I called Jessica just to see how she was doing. She told me that she was getting along okay. During the course of the conversation, I said that maybe she should rethink the carpet because in years to come, she might really want something of his. And she said, yes, she agreed, and she'd actually found a friend who would take it for her and store it until she got a bigger place. But really, she said, what I wish I had of Henry's were those wooden bowls.
That story was, I think, the first story that I ever heard you tell at the Institute Library around the table, I believe. And for some reason, that person represented by those two wooden bowls always stuck with me. And when I knew that I wanted to do a show on This Person Changed Me, when I knew that Art Miller would be here, who has that story that fits that theme so well, I thought this story also really fits that theme. And we talked about it, and you said, well, you weren't sure if it fit the theme, but I think it really does. The unique nature of the relationship in this story is really, really compelling, I feel, because it's so one particular relationship between two people. It's unique. It's a unique relationship that you had. And I think you convey what that was so strongly in this, that I've always remembered that story very strongly.
Thank you, Saul, because I had forgotten about it. And you came up and said, could you do the story about the bowls? And I said,
you're like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So we have our next storyteller, Laconia Terrio. You can watch a lot of his work on video out on the internet, and he tells a lot of folk tales and a lot of traditional stories. But he talks. There was a workshop he did at Arts and Ideas in New Haven, and he talked about making the story your own, and that's the thing that I am so compelled by in his storytelling, is that he's telling these traditional stories, but he's so internalized them. He's so made them a conversation between him and the audience. And there's a video. I'm going to try to put the link in the comments. There's a video of you, Laconia, telling 3 stories, and in between, just a very simple little explanation, just telling why you told each story. That I find really compelling because of the way in which it's storytelling that is traditional but feels completely personal, and it feels almost like a teacher with their students, the way you are with that audience. So I'm going to try to find that clip and put that in the comments so people can see that if they are interested. So Laconia Terrio.
Thank you, Art. Thank you, Saul. She was 13 years old, and as chaplain at the hospital, it was my job to do rounds. My favorite units are oncology, psychiatry, and pediatrics. I'm pretty eclectic. This day when I walked in, I asked were there any people that they would like me to check out. And they told me about this young woman who had tried to hurt herself. And so I knocked on her door. She was the only one in the room. There was an attendant with her. And I said, "Can I come in?" And she said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm a chaplain." And her 13-year-old self just looked at me and said, "Okay." So I walked into the room. I told her my name. She told me her name. And I asked, like I'm prone to, I said, "Why are you here?" And her response was, "I tried to hurt myself." So we talked about that a little bit. And as a storyteller, I hardly ever bring storytelling into my work. But something about this young lady that compelled me to at least make this offer. So I said to her, "You don't know this, but in my other life, I tell stories. And I have a story that I think really fits you, but I can't tell it to you unless you give me your permission." And her 13-year-old self looked at me and she just said, "Shoot." And this is a story that I told her. Once there was a boy. I don't know how old he was, but it was his job every day to take 2 huge water pots a half-mile down the hill to the stream. He would fill both water pots up. He'd walk back up the hill, place them down on the ground, and that was this boy's job every day. One morning, the young boy placed the water pots on his shoulders. He walked down to the stream. He filled the water pots up, walked back up to the top of the hill where the house was, placed the water pots on the ground, and the water pot on the left went, "Ah." And the boy said, "What's wrong?" The water pot said, "Well, you take my brother and I down to the stream and you fill both of us up. But when we get back to the top of the hill, my brother's always full. I've got a crack in my side. I am only half full." The boy said, "Did you see anything as we walked up your side of the trail coming up?" And the cracked pot said, "I saw nothing." The boy said, "Tell me what you see tomorrow." The next morning, he got up and he placed both water pots on his shoulders. He walked down to the stream. He filled the water pots up. He walked up to the top of the hill. He placed the water pots on the ground, and the cracked pot on the left went, "And the boy said, "What's wrong?" "I am not doing my job," the pot said. "My brother is full. I am not. I've got this crack in my side. I am leaking. I am not doing my job." The boy said, "Did you do what I asked? Did you see anything as we walked up the hill?" And the cracked pot said, "Yes, I saw something." And the boy said, "What?" He said, "I saw flowers and herbs." "And what colors were those?" The boy said, "Yellow, green, mauve." And then the boy said, "You don't get it, do you?" And the cracked pot said, "Get what?" The boy said, "I knew that you had a crack in your side. And one day when you weren't looking, I went along your side of the trail and I planted flower seeds and herbal seeds. And at nighttime, I take some of those flowers that you've been watering and I place them in a vase. And I take some of the herbs and my mom cooks with them." And only then did the cracked pot truly understand. That's the story. So when I finished, the girl asked me the question, "What does that story mean?" And I said, "My job is to tell the story. Your job is to figure out the story for yourself. But I'm going to be here till 4 o'clock today. And if you want to tell me what you think the story means, you can always have me paged. That was 10:30. I really did not expect her to call. But about 2:30, I was paged. And when I walked into her room, her mother was there. And she looked at me and she said, I figured out the story. And because of HIPAA laws, I said, do you want your mother to leave? And her response was, I want my mother to hear what I have to say. And I said, what's the story? And her response, direct quote, the cracked pot is me. And that story tells me that I can be cracked and still okay. The mother cried, the 13-year-old girl cried, and I cried. She got the story. Saul?
There's such an interaction with you in your life between stories and the story of your life. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, the way in which you interpret so much of your life, it seems, through these traditional stories and how they interact with you and how that all started for you?
Well, I'll answer that, but if I may, I want to say to you that I think one of the things I'm appreciating about you since I've gotten to know you a little bit is I've watched you with each of the storytellers and each of the musicians. And you're engaged. And I want to say that you're modeling for me how I want to be if I'm ever a producer.
Thank you.
But so I'm cracked.
Mm.
And I'm older than that kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell the cracked pot because when I'm telling that story to everybody else, I recognize that we're all cracked whether we know it or not.
Mm.
And I value very much the work we all have to do when we're working on stories. There are times when I'm working on a story that I have to put the story away because I might start crying because I know that I don't have the strength in that story, but that story is still in me that I still think it's important to tell.
Mm.
So I think in that particular story, I am as cracked as that young lady. And I've had people come up to me after I've told that story and they voluntarily will say, this is what my crack is. And I find that tremendously moving.
It's like, it seems as if you empathizing so deeply with the story makes the listener empathize very deeply with you. And it forms this bond, it forms this connection. I think that's what that's about.
Well, you and I, we talked about this in the workshop, and I think you were the one who really connected with it. People know when you're not connected to your story.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some stories that I do not tell because I've heard other people tell the same story that I told. And I said to myself, they love that story in a way that I can never love that story. Therefore, that story is not mine to tell anymore.
Mm.
And it didn't, and I think I was telling that story okay. But when they were telling the story, I felt something in me that I never felt when I was telling the story. And that I decided I can't tell that story. I've done that with 3 or 4 stories.
Wow.
I think that's okay.
Yeah. To be attentive to that itself, that's a very strong thing.
It's we live privileged lives to be able, in my view, to tell stories and to actually have people listen to them. Can't hear you. I lost you. No sound.
And uh, um, I am back. Excellent. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit, if you can hear me, about Bob Fry. I've known Bob for a long time, but I've especially been following his music for about 12 years now. And it's great to be able to bring him here virtually, because for many years, I've been saying, Bob, if you're ever in New Haven, I really want to get you into my show. And now here he will be. So if you ever find yourself in New Haven, and now he has found himself in the virtual space with which he can be in this show. I want to quote a review of Bob's album Long Shot Deal that was in Twangri-La. Harry Kaplan wrote, "Smart songwriting is what Bob Fry is all about. These are not songs so much as they are poems set to music. They are incredibly tangible, and all of them tell a great story or require some thought or introspection." Do we have Bob?
Hey,
There he is.
Saul.
Okay. And you can hear me, Bob? Yes? No. Oh, his speaker's off.
I'm killing my speaker for the sound. We get
Yes.
it
Okay.
there? All right.
Let's do it.
Thanks a bunch for having me. Really happy to be here. Everyone's been really cool to listen to tonight, and I hope you hear me okay. So it's called Long Shot Deal. I'm going to do a couple songs about my wife, Laura, and one song about my brother. So here's Long Shot Deal. Hey, darling, my head's on fire. I feel like something's gonna happen soon. And I've been waiting to see you for a little while. Now I don't know what to do. If I could turn it around on my own, don't you think I'd do the same for you? But it's a long, long way and a long shot deal, but that ain't nothing new. Nothing new. And hey, lover, it's cold outside, but inside it's colder still. I got here room with a window and a back door plan. I got a number and I got the well. I know you're traveling now, and it kinda seems far, but you can always find me still, yeah. It's a long, long way, and a long shot deal, but you're still beautiful. Beautiful. And hey, friends, looks like I'm calling again. I'm worn out on my sleeve. I caught it right from the start. I played it straight from the heart. I took a runner on a long shot deal. That ain't no surprise, you know I've always been lucky. Now I'm just looking for some time to steal, yeah. It's a long, long way. Bet it all today on the long shot deal. Long shot deal. Hey, darling, it ain't nothing tragic, no more drastic than a second thought. And I've been easy to read for a long time now, some kind of steady, ain't that what you bought? Now I ain't going nowhere, I got no place I'm longing to be, except wherever you are, that's wherever I'll be. It's a long shot deal, baby, you and me. It's just a long, long way, a long shot deal, baby, you and me. I bet it all today on a long shot deal, baby, you and me. Long shot deal. All right, so I think probably supposed to just keep on going here. It's called Long Shot Deal. This next one's called California. This song I wrote for my brother a few years ago. Hope it's sounding okay. From the time I known you, you've been cursed and blessed. Always said you were the one. Always stood your ground, never would back down. Nah, you would never be outrun. Through the reels of bluster, yes, I watched you muster it courage unforeseen. And now you finally gotten all them things you wanted. You got the prize, but now you're bleeding. I watched you take your place. I saw it in her face. Yeah, she was scornful like a queen, with a band of righteous judges and no sense of irony. And a baby waited as a mother cried, and a father looked away. And I wish that I could help you find a peaceful place to lay your body down. California, do you think it let you down? And sometimes I wonder if you should have stuck around. And whoever's calling, hey, I just tell them you're not here yet, but everything's alright. And you'll be back before too long. Do you still recall the way she looked when she was beautiful in the shadow of a reckoning before she changed her point of view? Now the truck stop lover makes the rules for all who come to stare and bear witness at the accident and all that happened there. In California, do you think it let you down? And sometimes I wonder if you should have stuck around. Whoever's calling, I'll just tell them you're not here yet, but everything's alright. And you'll be back before too long. It seems everywhere the people speak in rumor and regret. And I wait for some sign of reason, but it hasn't happened yet. I stood by you through all your darkest days. I seen you broken down and busted, and I seen it written on the walls. Only the poets should be trusted. In California, do you think it let you down? And sometimes I wonder if you should have stuck around. Now whoever's calling, I'll just tell them you're not here yet, but everything's alright. And you'll be back before too long. In California, and will it always let you down? And sometimes I wonder if you should have stuck around. Whoever's calling, I'll just tell them you're not here yet, but everything's alright. And you'll be back before too long. Yes, everything's alright. And you'll be back before too long. Yes, everything's alright. All right, man, that one's from my brother James. This last one's for Laura. This is also for Saul. It's called Song for L, just because last I knew, Saul dug this tune. Keep that capo right on 5. Here we go. It's called Song for L. Thanks a bunch for having me. A part of this show. Super cool. I do it anytime. I love the stories and I love the songs. Here we go. This is my song for L, and I play it in 3/4 time. It's slow and it's simple. I wrote it this morning after holding her close as she cried. This is my song for L. Yes, that one's tough and fragile, it's true. And I can still see her there in the doorway, her hair falling down, her eyes tear-stained and blue. And this is my song for a dancer. Yes, I think of her sometimes that way. She's light and she's graceful, elegantly wistful as she moves through the steps of her day. This is my song for a dreamer. Yes, she's a girl with the world in her hands. Now she's feeling confused by the moves, what to do when the world don't work out like you planned. This is my song for L. You take solace where solace is due. And Scorpio lover, the gray in November, it seems it's forever following you. This is my song for L. Will love will leave all that darkness behind. Do you remember that night when I stared at the lights on the ocean? I could still see them shine. Do you remember that night when we stared at the lights on the ocean? I could still see them shine. This is my song for L, and I play it in 3/4 time. It's slow and it's simple. I wrote it this morning after holding her close as she cried. This is my song for L. Yes, that one's tough and fragile, it's true. I can still see her there in the doorway, her hair falling down, her eyes tear-stained and blue. And I can still see her there in the doorway, her hair falling down, her eyes tear-stained and blue. Yes, I can still see her there in the doorway, her hair falling down, her eyes tear-stained and blue.
Do you remember that night we stared at the lights on the ocean? I can still see them shine. I love that. I just love the way that flows there. And I think I'm hearing some echo because of your mic, but I wanted to say The song California, I remember that's from your previous CD, and I always loved that song, but your lyrics are so imagistic. I never thought, it never occurred to me before, I don't know why, that it's about your brother, who of course was a screenwriter in California, and I'm finally understanding that song, whereas before it was just a series of beautiful images to me, and now it's a story. So that was very cool to see. But you are correct. I love that final song, particularly. Something about that song has always hit me. The way that lyric flows over that music. Bob, by the way, is in Wisconsin in a cabin right now. That's why we're getting the echo, and that's why he's sometimes turning his speaker off and then turning it back on. But Bob, if you don't know, you sounded fantastic. The sound really did work. So
Can I jump in there, Saul?
Yeah,
man?
jump in.
Yeah, it's just awkward because I'm trying to turn the speaker up and down and the mic on and off. But thanks for real. Thanks a bunch for having me. It was super fun. If you like California before you knew what it was about, that must mean that it's okay too.
Yeah.
But, it's a pleasure to play song for L for you after hearing lots of good things from you about it. So thanks for having me, for sure.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
All right, man.
Okay. This is our show for tonight. We've gone through our 3 storytellers, and tonight our 2 singers. Ponybird could not make it tonight. She will probably be back in a later Songs and Stories. I think it went well. I think I will do it again. I wasn't sure with this whole virtual thing, but I think I will be back with this. Before we go, we did something last time, and it's just very impromptu, but I'd just like to hear if any of the performers want to say one final thing. Do we still have Deacon Art Miller out there? Yeah. Oh, we can get everyone up at once. This technology it's incredible. All right. So do you want to say anything about this evening? What was this evening like for you? How did you like everyone else's stuff?
There is one is given in a divine moment, courage to dare a deed that challenges the self, to kindle a hope that inspires the defeated, the lost, the forgotten, the despised, the victimized. I pray to live only in those moments, and this night was one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm always so impressed and blown away by storytellers who can use the narrative form to really transform an audience and make such a beautiful connection. So thank you for including me on this night. I was moved, and the energy was still there even though we weren't all in the same room.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank Rev Kev, who kept the whole thing going on the technical side, and all the listeners for listening, because without knowing that you're out there, there's no point in telling the story.
I would say, I think in light of everything that's happening in our country today, evenings like this still give me hope.
Super cool, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks again. It's an honor to be a part of this, and good luck to everyone. Keep making art. I teach at an art school too during the day to 11th and 12th graders, so keep making art.
Excellent.
Art school teachers. I teach creative writing at an art school as well. Okay. So, Rev Kev, thank you so much. Do you want to take us out with the theme again?
Yay.
Baobab Tree Studios, take us out.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Sometimes I think about life and death, but not because I'm worried about drawing my last breath. I'm just wondering about logistics and getting here to there. Will I rent the basement apartment or own the penthouse in the air? What do you think about before you say goodnight? What do you dream about while you're sleeping tight? What are your assessments of your life so far? Do you feel fulfilled or are you wishing on the stars?